A smart person I respect deeply recently asked me when I was going to be talking about McCarthyism and Senator Joe McCarthy. And April 21st is as good a day as any because that's the day that Senator Joe McCarthy bit the dog that bit him back, which was the US Army or arguably television cameras. However, I want to say that the reason that smart people are thinking about McCarthyism right now is because there's two shapes on the wall that look a lot like parts of McCarthyism, right? And when we see these silhouettes appear in history, we see them appear again and again. I think that McCarthyism has some of these same silhouettes, absolutely. But I also think there are some other ones that we need to talk about. And so I'm going to come back to that. So Truman, immediately after World War II, decides that we're going to go with something called what becomes called the Truman Doctrine, that says that we're going to financially support Europe's rebuilding and that we're militarily going to support democracy in places outside of the United States. On March 12th of 1947, he announces the executive order that says that federal employees in the United States are going to be tested for loyalty. And that loyalty test includes 4 bullet points. The initial executive order mentions 4 things that loyalty tests are going to test for, which are sympathies for totalitarianism, fascism, communism, and subversiveness of the US government. But quickly that becomes this witch hunt that unfolds of looking for communists specifically. And that ends up with Senator Joe McCarthy having the absolutely intense communist witch hunt unfold both within the US government and within arts and education and everywhere else. This has all of 2 silhouettes markers. The first one is that it has a ton of dehumanizing and lack of decorum and respect language, right? They're not looking at these people as equal. If you are labeled a communist, you are in deep, deep trouble, right? This is not a conversation about ideas. The other thing is that the fear of being labeled a communist becomes this stifling effect in education, in the arts, in the government, that all you have to have happen is be named a communist and everything else falls apart. So that's the setting when McCarthy declares war on the US Army and says that there's a bunch of communists in the US Army and they have this big trial. But the trial is televised for the first time and people are able to see Senator Joe McCarthy in action. There's this lawyer named Mr. Walsh that is on the Army team, and there's a lawyer named Roy Cohn that's on the McCarthy team. Roy Cohn has a little bit of a problem, which is that he was eligible for the draft multiple times and somehow never went. And he asks Mr. Walsh, the Army's lawyer, not to mention that. And Mr. Walsh says, sure, I won't mention that, but I have my own little problem, which is that this kid named Fred Fisher, who works for my law firm, real nice guy. You can look up pictures of him. He's like this Peter Parker dork nerd looking kid. When he was at Harvard, he had communist sympathies and was in a club that was part of a communist sympathy. And I need you to not bring that up. We're not going to ruin this kid's career over what happened during his undergrad. And they agreed. And then a few weeks into June 9th of 1954 in the trial, Senator Joe McCarthy goes rabid and goes after Fred Fisher. And the lawyer, Mr. Walsh, calls it out, right? He calls out that this is just. So anyway, he says, until this moment, Senator, I think I've never really gauged your cruelty or recklessness. And Senator Joe McCarthy on TV goes after him again, goes after Fred Fisher a second time. And Mr. Walsh says, let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. You have done enough. Have you no sense of decency? And that's kind of the shot that actually got Senator Joe McCarthy, was on live television being called out for his lack of decency. Now, I think that there's a couple of pieces here. One, you have those 2 silhouettes, this dehumanizing lack of decorum, but it did, like, just having it televised was enough that it stopped it, right? And you had this chilling effect on education and conversation. There's another place in history where you see these two silhouettes with the addition of three others that I want to mention. And that is pre Night of the Long Knives, Germany. Hitler is working hard to erode democratic protections, democratic systems, right? Which is a huge red flag because in democratic systems, everyone is in part limited because they know that at any moment in time they're going to have another election and give their power back. And that if you hoard too much power in your role, then the next person in your role is also going to have your power. That's inherently what this means, right? And it's a red flag when Hitler begins hoarding this power because it means that Hitler's not intending to give it back. The fourth thing is that there's this extrajudicial systems, paramilitary systems begin emerging, right? German military didn't actually particularly always like Hitler. And the thing that protected Hitler was that he had other groups that he was in control of doing some of the dirty work, doing some of the control. And when you have systems outside of traditional structure making governmental choices or doing the work of control, that's a red flag. And then you have the Hitler silhouette of a single person's personality being key. Senator Joe McCarthy's personality was his downfall, right? It was that he went on television and said things, and the U.S. people were like, whoa, this dude's a jerk, man. We don't want a jerk controlling this thing, right? Why would he go after this kid? Don't be a jerk, Senator Joe McCarthy. Hitler was a guy who we can see being the single person that people liked, right? For reasons that are kind of complicated and inexplicable sometimes, people actually liked him and they followed him. And it was that individual personality people getting behind that's a silhouette that really matters.